Halloween night cleaners. The streets were finally quiet. The last of the Halloween parties had died down, leaving only the distant echoes of drunk college students stumbling home. It must have been around 2 a.m., and I was making my way back from a friend's party, slightly buzzed but still aware enough to notice how messy the streets had become. Crushed candy wrappers glinted under the flickering streetlights. Broken pumpkins lay scattered across sidewalks, their candles still weakly flickering inside. Torn decorations and discarded costume pieces created eerie shadows in the cold autumn wind. That's when I heard it. A strange scraping sound, like long nails being dragged across concrete. At first, I thought it was just trash being blown by the wind, but it was too rhythmic, too deliberate. I turned the corner and froze. In the dim light, I saw them, an elderly couple cleaning the street. But something was wrong. Their movements were unnatural, their joints bending at impossible angles as they picked up trash. The woman's neck was twisted almost completely backward, her empty eyes fixed on me while her body faced the opposite direction. The man's fingers. God, his fingers. They were impossibly long, like pale spider legs, scraping against the pavement as he gathered wrappers and debris into a trash bag that seemed to writhe with a life of its own. I tried to run, but every turn brought me back to the same street. They were always there, methodically cleaning, their movements becoming more distorted with each glimpse. The woman's head would rotate further, the man's fingers would stretch longer, and that trash bag. I swear I saw something moving inside it. When I finally made it home, I spent hours trying to convince myself it was just the alcohol playing tricks on my mind. But deep down, I knew what I saw was real. And somehow, I knew this wouldn't be the last time I'd see them. A week passed, but I couldn't shake off that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those twisted figures. The scraping sound haunted my dreams, always accompanied by the rustling of that writhing garbage bag. Last night, I woke up in cold sweat around 3 a.m. As I reached for water, movement outside my window caught my eye. There they were, on my street, cleaning with those unnaturally fluid movements. The woman's head snapped toward my window. I dropped to the floor, heart pounding. When I finally gathered the courage to look again, they were gone. But the street, it was spotless. Not a single piece of trash remained. Even the fallen leaves had vanished. I started noticing a pattern. They appeared more frequently near houses that left trash outside. My neighbor, who always scattered cigarette butts in his front yard, claimed he heard scratching on his windows at night. Another neighbor found long, deep scratches on her garbage bins. The scratches always appeared in sets of 5, spread unnaturally wide apart. Just like those elongated fingers I saw that Halloween night. I began obsessively cleaning around my house. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. The thought of those twisted figures appearing near my home again was unbearable. Sometimes, when taking out trash at night, I'd catch glimpses of them in the distance. They never approached clean areas. They just watched, their forms barely visible in the darkness, before disappearing around corners. But they were getting closer. Each sighting brought them nearer to inhabited areas. What started as distant figures now became detailed horrors. I could see how their skin stretched like old paper over impossible angles. How their movements defied human anatomy. How that trash bag seemed to digest whatever they put inside. I wasn't the only one seeing them anymore. As Halloween approached again, the sightings increased. The elderly couple appeared more frequently, their presence growing bolder. What used to be glimpses in the darkness became full apparitions under streetlights. My neighbor's kid ended up in the hospital after leaving candy wrappers scattered across their front yard. He claimed something with long fingers had reached through his window. The doctors called it night terrors, but the 5 parallel scratches across his windowsill told a different story. The worst incident happened at the abandoned house 3 doors down. Some teenagers had been using it for parties, leaving their trash everywhere. One morning, we woke up to ambulance lights. They found the teens huddled in a corner, muttering about a woman whose head kept spinning, showing them all the trash they'd left behind over the years. The garbage they'd thoughtlessly tossed had somehow filled every room, piled floor to ceiling. I started documenting every sighting. The couple always appeared between 2 and 4 a.m., when the streets were emptiest. They moved in a specific pattern, focusing on areas where Halloween celebrations left the most waste. Their cleaning was thorough but disturbing. The streets they visited ended up supernaturally clean, as if every speck of dirt had been erased from existence. That twisted trash bag they carried grew larger each time I saw it. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I swore I could hear muffled sounds coming from inside it, like years of discarded Halloween memories trying to escape. One night, I followed them. Not intentionally, I just kept running into them on my way home. Each time I turned a corner, there they were, methodically cleaning. The woman's head rotated to track my movement while her hands never stopped working. The man's fingers seemed to stretch longer with each piece of trash they collected. I noticed something else too. They were becoming more solid, more present. What started as translucent figures now cast shadows under the streetlights. And their movements, they were starting to look almost human. I found the photo while helping clean out old Halloween decorations from the community storage. It was stuck between boxes of plastic skeletons and fake cobwebs, yellowed with age but still clear enough to stop me in my tracks. The couple in the photograph stood in front of a house decorated with hand-carved pumpkins. The same house that now stands abandoned at the end of my street. But it wasn't their location that made my blood run cold, it was their faces. The same faces I'd been seeing in the darkness, only without the horrific distortions. The woman wore a witch's hat, surrounded by children in costumes. Her smile was warm, nothing like the twisted expression I'd seen in the dark. The man stood beside her, his normal-sized hands holding a bowl of candy. The date on the back read Halloween, 1993. More photos spilled out. Each Halloween captured in fading color, the couple decorating their house, hosting parties, handing out candy. Year after year, their house was the neighborhood highlight. Children's faces lit up with joy, parents chatting on their porch. The photos told a story of people who lived for making others happy. The final photo showed their house dark, windows boarded up. A small note was scribbled on the back, "First Halloween without them, 1994. That night, I saw them again. The woman's head still twisted unnaturally, but I noticed something different. She was adjusting decorations that kids had knocked over. The man's elongated fingers weren't just grabbing trash, they were carefully separating recyclables. Their movements were still disturbing, but there was an undeniable purpose to their actions. For the first time, I didn't run. I watched as they restored order to the chaos of Halloween celebrations, just as they had done in life. The writhing trash bag still terrified me, but now I understood they weren't here to harm. They were continuing what they had always done, in the only way they still could. The stories started coming out slowly. Not from history books or newspapers, but from the old neighbors who still remembered them. Small fragments of memories shared in quiet conversations. I learned they had no children of their own. Maybe that's why they poured everything into making Halloween special for the neighborhood kids. Every year, they would start planning months in advance. Hand-carved pumpkins, homemade treats, and decorations that transformed their entire house. But what stuck with me most was how they handled the aftermath. Long after other houses went dark, they would be out there cleaning. Not just their property, the entire neighborhood. They believed no child should wake up to see their magical night turned into morning trash. The night they died, they had been cleaning up after the Halloween festivities. A drunk driver, heavy rain, and a dark street. They were found still holding their cleaning supplies. That's when the pattern clicked. The areas they haunted weren't random, they were the same routes they used to clean during their lives. The strange, twisted movements I witnessed were them continuing their work, their forms distorted by death but their purpose unchanged. Each new detail made them less terrifying and more tragic. The writhing trash bag that had haunted my nightmares? It moved because they sorted recyclables, just as they had in life. The woman's rotating head was her checking for overlooked litter. The man's elongated fingers reached places others couldn't, ensuring no trash was left behind. They weren't monsters. They were simply continuing their life's work, their forms altered by death but their hearts unchanged. Winter came and went, but I couldn't stop thinking about them. I started noticing things I'd missed before. Like how the old Halloween candy wrappers they collected were always from decades ago, brands that didn't exist anymore, faded colors from another time. Each piece they picked up seemed to hold a memory. Their cleaning route made sense now. The corner where they used to hand out extra candy to kids who ran out too early. The spot where they helped a crying child find his lost costume piece. The driveway where they would set up a hot chocolate station for cold parents. But they were still terrifying. Death had twisted them into something unnatural. The woman's neck still rotated beyond human limits, and the man's fingers still stretched like pale branches in the dark. The trash bag still writhed with unexplainable life. Yet knowing their story made the horror different somehow. Not softer, just purposeful. I started watching them from my window more often. They never acknowledged me, but their patterns became clearer. They moved slower near spots where children used to gather, their distorted forms pausing as if remembering. Sometimes, they would adjust fallen decorations with those grotesque hands, making them perfect for the next day's children. One night, I found an old Halloween photo blown against my fence. It showed them surrounded by kids, all wearing costumes they had helped make. On the back was a child's messy writing, "Best Halloween ever." The date matched the candy wrappers they kept collecting. They weren't just cleaning up trash. They were gathering pieces of the happiness they once created, preserved in these small fragments of the past. Each wrapper, each broken decoration was a piece of joy they had brought to the neighborhood. The horror remained, but now it carried an echo of something else. Something that made their twisted forms and impossible movements feel less like a nightmare and more like a dark miracle. Things changed when people started understanding. Not everyone, some still ran screaming when they saw the woman's head spin or the man's fingers stretch into darkness. But others began to notice what I had. The neighborhood started cleaning up after Halloween parties. Not because they were scared anymore, but because they understood. The first year, just a few people joined in. Armed with trash bags and flashlights, they worked through the early morning hours. I was there too. The elderly couple appeared as usual, their forms still nightmarish in the street light. But they kept their distance from the clean areas, watching from shadows with those empty eyes. The woman's twisted neck straightened slightly when she saw us cleaning. The man's fingers seemed less grotesque when they weren't scraping against concrete. The writhing trash bag they carried looked different too. Less like a living nightmare, more like a sad collection of forgotten memories. Sometimes, old candy wrappers would fall out, pieces of joy they were still trying to preserve. Strange things still happened to those who left their trash out. Scratching sounds in the night. Windows that showed reflections of a spinning head. But these incidents became rare as more people joined the cleanup. One house remained defiant, leaving their Halloween mess untouched. That night, the temperature dropped unnaturally. Their security cameras caught impossible images: elongated fingers sliding under doors, a woman's head rotating completely as she gathered decades-old trash that hadn't been there before. They cleaned up after that. But the most unsettling change was in the couple themselves. Their appearances began shifting, flickering between the horror they'd become and glimpses of who they used to be. In certain lights, for split seconds, you could see them as they were in those old photos. The Halloween cleanup became a neighborhood tradition. Not the sanitized kind that appears in community newsletters, but something darker, more real. Parents warned their kids to pick up their candy wrappers, not with threats of punishment, but with whispered stories of the couple who still cared enough to return. Some claimed the elderly pair had started appearing in their dreams, not as the twisted forms we knew, but as they were in life, showing spots that needed cleaning, places that held special memories. Others swore they could hear the soft scraping of elongated fingers against pavement, guiding them to overlooked trash. The writhing trash bag became a sort of local legend. Kids dared each other to watch it at night, trying to glimpse what moved inside. Some said they saw old Halloween memories trying to escape, fragments of joy and laughter trapped in decades-old wrappers. Others insisted it was just shadow and wind. Nobody really knew for sure. I still saw them regularly, but their appearances changed. The woman's head no longer spun completely around, now it just turned slightly too far when watching children enjoy their Halloween night. The man's fingers, while still unnaturally long, seemed more gentle when picking up dropped candy or fixing fallen decorations. But they remained terrifying. Death had marked them permanently, twisting their forms into something that could never fully return to normal. The sound of their movement still sent chills down spines. Their presence still made streetlights flicker and temperatures drop. Yet the neighborhood adapted. People learned to listen for the scraping sounds that meant the couple was near. They taught their children to be respectful of the cleanup, not out of fear, but understanding. The horror became part of our Halloween tradition, not something to run from, but something to acknowledge with a mix of fear and gratitude. Last Halloween was different. The streets were cleaner than they'd ever been, not from fear, but from respect. As midnight passed and the last trick-or-treaters headed home, I noticed something unusual in the familiar scraping sounds. They appeared near their old house, now renovated and occupied by a new family. The woman's head was almost normal, turning only slightly too far as she watched children's leftover Halloween joy. The man's fingers, while still longer than humanly possible, no longer dragged against the concrete like claws. Their movements had changed too. The jerky, impossible angles were smoother now. The writhing trash bag hung quietly at their side, decades of collected memories finally at peace. They worked with an almost human rhythm, though their forms still cast impossible shadows under the streetlights. I watched from my usual spot as they made their rounds. They paused at each place that held meaning, where they'd once helped a lost child, where they'd handed out extra candy, where they'd warmed cold parents with hot chocolate. At each stop, their twisted forms seemed to flicker, momentarily showing who they used to be. Near dawn, they reached the spot where they died. The woman's head turned toward me, not the full rotation that had once made me run in terror, but a gentle movement that felt almost normal. For a moment, I saw her face as it had been in those old photographs. The man's fingers retracted slightly, almost human-like, as he picked up a final wrapper. They stood there as the sky began to lighten, their forms becoming transparent. The writhing trash bag lay still, decades of memories finally at rest. They didn't disappear completely, they never do, but they faded until they were barely visible, like a heat mirage on cold pavement. They still appear every Halloween. Not as often, and not to everyone, but they're there. The neighborhood keeps their tradition alive, not just the cleaning, but the spirit of what they created. Houses are decorated earlier each year. More candy is handed out. More children laugh in the streets. Sometimes, on particularly dark nights, you might catch a glimpse of impossible movements in the shadows. A head turning too far to watch children enjoy their Halloween night. Fingers stretching just a bit too long to straighten a crooked decoration. But it's different now. The horror remains, but it's wrapped in something else, something that feels like protection. The writhing trash bag appears less frequently. When it does, it's smaller, quieter. Some say it only collects memories now, not trash. The really old neighbors insist they've seen candy wrappers from their childhood float into it, carried by wind that moves against the natural direction. Their old house has become the heart of Halloween celebrations again. The new family found boxes of handmade decorations in the attic. They use them every year. Children say the decorations look better in the morning than they did the night before, adjusted by unseen hands to perfect angles. I still watch for them. Not out of fear anymore, but out of a strange sort of comfort. They're part of our Halloween now, not as monsters, but as guardians. Their tragedy transformed into something that preserves the joy they once created. The scraping sounds don't terrify me now. When I hear them, I think of dedication so deep it transcended death. Of love for community that horror couldn't erase. Of joy preserved in twisted forms and impossible movements. They remain in the shadows, watching over Halloween nights. Their forms still defy nature, still send chills down spines. But now we understand some horrors exist to protect what's precious. Some nightmares guard our sweetest dreams.